and dozens of people who've been in these companies and in these agencies. A lot of the really high-end work of that is being done in we'll go through a list: E-Systems, Raytheon, EG&G, et cetera, and so on. So that's what you have to understand. And, and the comical term that's used at the CIA by the people I know there currently is WSFM, weird science and frickin' magic. But at Lockheed Martin, at Northrop Grumman, they just call it PFM, pure effing magic. That's what the engineers call it. It just absolutely looks like magic. So that is what we're dealing with. Now let's go to the next slide. We're going to get into more detail. Is this too much? Are you following? Yeah? Well, there'll be time for question later. So when you look at the covert intelligence community's USAPs, you have to divide them into two general areas. You have advanced physics, and these are things that you can think of that are very 3D, 4D, ARVs, electromagnetic devices, programmed life forms that are robotic creatures that are bio-nano genetics. By the way, the state-of-the-art lab for that is Dulce. Cannot get to it by being anywhere near Dulce. There's a connector from Los Alamos underground and also some other UGVs. We'll get into that in a moment, where the underground system is connected. But these are the ones that are really where the action is. Trans-dimensional physics, both passive and active. Now, the reason I divide these into passive and active systems is that the passive systems are for intelligence gathering. So as we look at these passive systems, you're looking at the sort of things that if you were to develop electromagnetic interdimensional spycraft, and it's way past PRISM or the Monroe Institute. When I say way past, way past. PRISM was Snowden revealed NSA eavesdropping thing. Those are using electromagnetic linear. And these are systems that, as I mentioned, have electromagnetic assisted remote viewing into the conscious realm. And those allow spycraft to take place free of any tap or electromagnetic monitoring of telecommunication, what's called signals intelligence. Not necessary. And this is why everyone who works with me, when they first start working with me, they go, oh, we need to send everything encrypted, and we need this, and I said, don't bother. By the time the thought has left your cerebral cortex, it's been grabbed by these technologies. Now, one of my military advisors for many years was a naval commander, and he, back when the White Oaks Naval Facility was operative, it's closed now in Maryland, he saw a device that was called a white noise space-time electromagnetic extraction system. And what that was is that it was the device that could target anywhere, any volume of space, say the volume in this room, and say the device is there near Bethesda in Maryland. They could target the volume of this room and monitor anything going on now or that happened here last night, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 1,000,000 years ago, 1,000,000,000 years ago. It's called the white noise of space-time. The mystics call it the Akashic record. So encoded within the fabric of space-time is everything that has ever happened is still there as a standing energy waveform that can be extracted by this system. And that was in the 70s, and it had been fully operational long before he got there. Called the white noise space-time extraction. Okay, you understand what that is? So yeah, so it can target it, but it's actually pulling events and information and intelligence out of the structure of space-time and can target any volume anywhere. So this is why I say, Snowden, I told his lawyer, he made a very big mistake disclosing lame stuff like PRISM and the conventional NSA fiber optic going into Google and Facebook. The big action is this stuff. and that's why anyone who wants to work with me, I say, forget about encryption. Forget about secrecy. Ain't going to work. Because if you had $1 trillion, you couldn't frustrate these systems. Now, and then there are others that have been developed, or they're trying to develop, so-called Project Red Light. That's based on studying extraterrestrial communication devices that can also look into the future or get a sense of the future events. Those are in development and are less precise, but that's only because all future events are only probabilities. So let me explain what I mean by that. Everything that we think and do at this moment is changing the future. And so if in this point in time you see an event in the future, by the time you've seen it, if you've shared that information, it can change that event. Does this make sense? So now, it may have a 95% likelihood, it may have a 99%, it may be a 80%, but it's not going to be 100%. The ones looking in the real time now or backward, like the white noise extraction systems, those are extremely accurate. Okay, so those are all passive systems that, and there are many others, that have been developed since the 50s, 60s, 70s. Certainly by the 60s and 70s, these were all fully operational. Okay, so you're not going to learn this in your physics class or your government class at the college year, but you'll learn it today, and I'm telling you the truth. Now, these are worrisome just because they're very unacknowledged special access projects, spy systems. These are where my bigger concern is. And these active transdimensional systems deal with the ability to perturb or induce phenomenon from other realms and dimensions. I mentioned that a moment ago, where they could set up an electromagnetic vector into another dimension and cause a phenomenon to take place that would not only fool everyone, but could be very injurious to the Earth. One of these systems, I've been told recently, has been deployed in the past to be set up over certain tectonic fault lines to induce earthquakes and earth changes. And these are actively being deployed. Very dangerous game being played. This is why these events coming are going to be not just natural, but man-made and natural. Keep that in mind as things start unfolding. They're in the hands of some of the worst elements possible, which is why I said 25 years ago the disclosure of this subject and getting these technologies under the control of conscious, ethical people is of the utmost importance to the human future, and it is an existential crisis that it is in the hands of the people it's in. They have had the ability to do teleportation since the 50s, maybe 40s. You've all heard the Philadelphia experiment, wasn't actually in Philadelphia, it was in Rhode Island, but that was a cover story. But the long story short is the ability to cause an object to switch and fall out of one point in space and appear at another. That has been done fairly recently with particles in physics. It's been reported in mainstream physics journals. But what you need to know is through very high voltage and electromagnetic frequency field systems, it began to be studied and practiced and experimented with in the 40s and 50s. One of our disclosure project witnesses, Fred Threadfell, was up at a base up in Canada. That was a classified Air Force facility where they had this big room, and it sounds so prosaic, but they had an ashtray. And the ashtray would be on a box, and it had this electromagnetic field, and it would dematerialize and rematerialize on another part of the base, and they could just teleport it back and forth. An ashtray. That was in 1953. So these sort of sciences, trans-dimensional physics and sciences, have been developed over the last 60, 70 years. At this point in 2018, they're extraordinarily well developed, classified world, and they can stage pretty much anything they want, which is what they're doing. It also means they can materialize and dematerialize objects. They can weaponize these interdimensional portals, or so-called stargates. Now, this is the thing that is most concerning to me, is that all interstellar extraterrestrial civilization are crossing through these finer dimensions to get here. They're not going through linear solid space-time. But over the last 30, 40 years, they've developed the ability to weaponize, say, a vector or a portal into these other dimensions, and then create a weapon system that can target other starcraft, other planetary systems, and what have you. This is very dangerous in the hands of people who have the intention to utilize them. And this is of great concern to all of us. The other are the satellite-based systems. Back in the 70s, I met the man who was a very brilliant electromagnetic engineer, had his own company in the Tampa, St. Pete area, who had developed what he called a neutrino light detector. These are detectors that are placed on satellites that can pick up an ET craft when it's coming out of interdimensional, transdimensional space-time into this dimension, and it leaves a certain signature. And it's not conventional light. It's a neutrino kind of light scatter, but in the shape and form and vector of the spacecraft. That is then slaved, as they call, to weapon systems that are both in space on satellites and on the ground to target the ET craft and hit it with a very powerful electromagnetic weapon, which is how we've been causing these crash retrieval events to happen. But you're not going through billions of miles or light years of space and getting here and running out of gas and crashing. I mean, or an electrical storm. They don't know how to maneuver through an 737s can go around electrical storms. They're being targeted with these weapons that are faster than the speed of light because they are what are called scalar or longitudinal. So a quick study in that. Wave, like what you're seeing, has a wave function, right? So the wave function is 186,000 miles per second propagating. Scalar or longitudinal, it's a point in a line, and it doesn't have a wave function, and it is a multiples of the speed of light. Those scalar systems or longitudinal systems have been developed since the 40s, 50s, 60s, and have been weaponized. That was what was in the little secret radar dome. The FBI memo that we got has now become the #1 viewed document on the FBI website, from the field agent to J. Edgar Hoover about the Roswell event, where it says apparently they switched on a, quote, new radar system, and these things crashed. It wasn't radar the way you think of radar at Denver International Airport. That term radar, just so you know, is a euphemism used in unacknowledged special access projects to denote these sort of specialized pulsed electromagnetic weapon systems. And they call them radar. It's a euphemism. So these have been developed and were deployed in the 70s. There were systems in the 60s that were present in space, but they weren't as accurate because they didn't have these very subtle neutrino light detectors on them. And of course, then you have the land, air, and sea-based systems that aren't in space that have these interdimensional and scalar electromagnetic weapons. A good would be near Eglin Air Force Base. There's an area of beach there that's classified, and they have these big horseshoe-shaped objects that are connected to satellite tracking systems. And when they have picked up ET craft coming in, they'll switch it on and hit it with the equivalent of something much more powerful than an EMP, electromagnetic pulse, like you'd get from a nuclear weapon, but it's very directional, and it will disable the ET craft, and it'll drop straight out of the sky into the Gulf, and they'll go and retrieve it. I know people who've been on those retrieval teams. Yeah. You now understand why the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, the 3-star general I met with, in the first 10 minutes said, "Dr. Greer, we don't know why you haven't committed suicide yet." That was his first question.
Why haven't you? And then there are the mind-conscious interface weapons. These are ones, that get into radionic psychotronic disruptors. Very worrisome, because if you take, the concept of technology interfacing with mind and consciousness, and you were to weaponize it, then you can create a system that not only gathers intelligence, but disrupts people's function or level of consciousness, or can induce, as I mentioned earlier, hallucinogenic abduction states. But also, importantly, can disrupt amity, can disrupt relationships. There was a woman back in 93 or 94 who I met with for about a week, who had worked in one of these corporations. And she says, look, we have devices, and we can turn a dial, target a board meeting in New York City, and have the board come to the decision we want them to come to. Or we can turn the dial the other way. Everyone in the room is fighting with each other, hating each other. The egos come out. And these are very well-developed systems. Sounds like tinfoil hat stuff. And that's what they want you to believe. But those systems have been fully operational also since the 50s and 60s. So this is just sort of a quick overview of the constellation of types of technologies. I think you're getting the gist of this. Everything you've learned is wrong about this subject. Most of it is stagecraft. You have to have this information to go to the next level of what you need to do, and that's to become an interplanetary ambassador to these civilizations. Because I don't think it's going to happen out of the U.S. State Department or the UN anytime soon. And it is very important that you not give any power to this, but you have to be aware of it. And what do I mean by that? The consciousness within us and the central sun of reality, that state of conscious being, that's so much more powerful than these toys. But you have to access that state to frustrate them. It's just being a Shambhala warrior, spirit warrior. You have to understand the power of the consciousness within you, and the conscious mind that you're awake with right now is actually seamlessly integrated to the unbounded infinite mind of the great being at all times, in all places. So you can connect to that, transcend your own ego and individuality and fear and intellect, and connect to that, and that is the ultimate protection. But it's also the ultimate source of guidance, wisdom, discernment. That's why I said it was a very good thing I became a meditation teacher and a student of the Vedas and the cities and what have you before I got involved with this, because otherwise I would have been lost for sure, probably killed too. So this is very important for you to understand as a sort of milieu, sort of the prevailing environment that is extant. It's there, it's operational, it's fully operational, and it's being deployed all the time. It's the stock and trade of most things ufological. So I think we have to begin to... I had someone say to me once, well, you're really a skeptic about most. I said, no, it's not a skepticism. It's about knowledge. I've known all of this since the early and mid-90s. Terrible. Well, and of course, what you do when you're meeting with a politician, and I had dinner last night before I flew out here with one of the main editor of Politico and a former ambassador under Bill Clinton and some people in D.C. I have a home in D.C. and I meet with a lot of these kind of folks. And, you're trying to bring them up to ET and UFO 101, that they even exist. But they need to know this. But they don't. And it's a huge learning curve. It's vertical. And all of us have got to go through this learning curve very quickly so we don't get fooled again. Imagine this constellation of technologies being deployed to simulate an alien attack, simulate abductions, mutilations. And Dr. Altshuler home, and he was the horse, the original mutilated animal thing. That was him. That was the doctor who studied research, and the late 68 or something. He says, "Oh yeah," he says, "I discovered those were covert paramilitary programs doing those back in the late 60s. Nobody would listen." I said, "Oh yeah, of course they are. We know how they're doing it, and why they're doing it." It's really funny. Everyone said, "The aliens are mutilating the cattle." I said, "Yeah, right." I know exactly who's doing it, where they're doing it, where they're operating out of, what technologies they're using, and they've been doing it since the 60s. Now, to the hysterical public, the aliens are mutilating our cattle and women folk, and they're doing this and they're doing that. I'm going, yeah, well, but they're not extraterrestrial. Go back to the previous slide, and you'll see alien is a catch-all. So what part of this is extraterrestrial? What part of it is interdimensional? What part of it innately interdimensional? And what part of it is man-made simulators using very advanced technologies that who knows how many trillions of dollars, at least $8 trillion in one Michigan State University study recently, some $21 trillion in covert money have gone into. Our entire national debt, by the way, would be all set if we could claw back the $21 trillion that have been embezzled into these projects. Yeah. So it's a lot of money, and with it comes a lot of technology and a lot of brilliant people. The smartest people I have ever met on this planet that are not ET have been people who have been identified in high school and college and pulled into a USAP, unacknowledged special access project. IQ's 200 and north. I mean, just geniuses. And what a waste. Because they're spending their lives working for these fascists who have an agenda of World War III being interplanetary, just as Wernher von Braun warned on his deathbed. So if you take all of this in the aggregate and realize that people say, when is the false flag going to happen? I said, well, that started in the 50s. The false flag operators started in the 50s when they developed alien reproduction vehicles, gravity control, then started doing stagecraft simulating and ET encounters that scared people, etc. in some 50s, 60s, 90s till now. It's all been part of an acculturation and brainwashing and counterintelligence so that people, when they're ready to hit the button, bang, would say, will be convinced that whatever that is an actual hostile alien invasion. That's the basis of it. Now, you've all heard that President Trump recently called for the formation of a space force. And all right, now, wait. I'm a little long in the tooth, or getting old. I'll be weak, terrifying idea. Imagine having me as a grandfather. Anyway, and doing, but this is a frightening thought, that, or father for that matter. But you know, the Space Force, what he's really doing is acknowledging something that already exists. All right. Whether he knows that or not, I don't know. I doubt it. The people, the men and women I've dealt with for the last 25 or more years, projects, have been in an operational command, space command, that have satellite systems first deployed in the 60s that could target ET craft, and have been refined and refined and refined. We're on like the 200th generation, I don't know, of refinement of those technologies over the last 60 years, 50 to 60 years. But those exist already. Now, of course, what he wants to do is form a sixth branch of the acknowledged branch. And what I'm concerned about is the people who are maneuvering to do so are people who are getting ready for this false flag threat alien invasion thing that, of course, we were warned about by Wernher von Braun in the 70s and nobody listened. But I think that's I think, an open preparation. I don't think that he's read into this. So let me explain what presidential intelligence briefings, at least to the extent I've been involved since Papa Bush in 91 to and Clinton onwards, is that the people who are read in heavily are people who came into the presidency or vice presidency, the case of Papa Bush or Cheney, from the committee, who had come along through their careers. But most presidents, say Bill Clinton, Bubba came in as a governor from Arkansas. He wanted to be read into this, was denied access. His CIA director was denied access. Subsequently, he was kind of told, leave this alone, and when your next president, we'll read you in, which is what happened. They didn't trust him in the Oval Office having the information, in other words. His CIA director that I briefed ended up betraying everyone, getting a position with Booz Allen Hamilton, which is a big contractor that deals with this and other things, and took sort of the golden parachute. Most people, if they're threatened enough, or if they're given enough inducements, or both, usually it's both, will take the buyout. In 92, the head of Army Intelligence offered me personally $2 billion with a B dollars to defect. I wouldn't do it. So it's most people are going to take the $2 billion. But I think I always say what all this boils down to is integrity, and courage, and you got to have both. And the courage is a lot to ask for from a politician. Never mind it. But they know that. The people who are on the Majority Intelligence Committee that handles all this, there are dozens and dozens of unacknowledged special access projects that deal with this. They are sort of silos. For example, the gentleman who recently came forward, he was given baseline clearance, it's called, across 18 of them. But there, out of 6,000 people, there were only 3 people that had baseline clearance across them. So they're usually very, very compartmented, isolated. One of the things that he shared with me, which was very interesting, is the fact that there's a facility near Lawton, Oklahoma, near Fort Sill, where there's an underground base that has these, one of the spacecraft that was downed apparently in the 80s or 90s, that is being studied to figure out how it cloaks. And, he has seen that facility. There's also a facility that where we downed an ET craft outside Seoul, South Korea, and they had to bore a huge facility into a mountain, and there's an ET craft there. There's a facility in Irvine, California, that looks like an office park, but you go way underground, and there's a facility where they're studying the extraterrestrial bodies. There's all kinds of facilities and operations, some of which I knew about and some I did not. And what was fascinating to me is that, this man had been in the Army as a career person, retired, and then got rehired as a civilian, and then, and only then, was read into these projects, and he didn't even know what an unacknowledged special access project was. But when he saw this movie, he went, this man knows what he's talking about. So he was pulled into what's called the TMO, Technology Management Office of the Pentagon. Let's go to the next slide. And this is a couple of this is by no means comprehensive. I just wanted to give you an idea of where some of these facilities are, and kind of where they're, how they're structured. There's an entire Edwards base and related facilities on the left here, Edwards Air Force Base in the high desert of California. And you have these various, Haystack Butte is a specific place that has an underground facility. Beneath that, China Lakes, George Norton has been decommissioned, Tabletop Mountain, and Blackjack Control. Interesting, Blackjack Control is at Edwards. The top secret document is the National Reconnaissance Office, which is the office that runs all the super secret spy satellites, mentions Blackjack operation, but blackjack control, and that's out of Nellis, so-called Area 51, although it's not really called Area 51. But blackjack control is actually at the Edwards facility.